Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. So I follow this Twitter feed, Raw and Rendered. I'm not sure if it's a bunch of different people or just one person. There's a bunch of cool images there, though, so I was just sort of perusing it. And sometimes I'll try to recreate some of the stuff that's on here. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this one. And so I thought this would be a cool test using the discrete particle system to place different things procedurally, pack things onto a surface, and do some other sort of mesh ops and things like that in Modo to create one of these little spheres with a bunch of disks constrained to it. So that's what this one's going to be about. His looks pretty cool. This is what I came up with. A little bit boring, but I'm sure you could do better. Anyway, so let's just jump right into it. Let me just bring up Modo here. And first thing we need is a good Catmull-Clark subdivision surface sphere. And the one that comes with Modo isn't actually very good. It's a little bit oblong. So this is just a quick tip on creating a really good Catmull-Clark sphere is just create a sphere mesh op here in an empty mesh. And what you want to do is I'm just going to pop up mini props here and turn it to tessellation and press C for channel hall and right click and just get it to like 20 or so. So this is a great, really perfect tessellated sphere. And we're going to constrain the Catmull-Clark sphere to this and then freeze it. So just press in, hovering over the item list. Going to add another sphere mesh op there. But this time we will do a quad ball. And just sort of zooming out here, press C for channel hall, or it'll actually still be up there if you never press C again and turn it off. Right click and just get some, maybe 6 levels or so. So it's like this. And then we're going to constrain it to this one underneath it. Okay, so let's just go back to perspective and advanced. And there's a mesh up called surface constraint. So I'll just type that in and hit OK. Now the closest surface will be mesh, which was the triangulated sphere, and just hit OK, and you'll see that sort of snap down into place like that. And then all you have to do is just right-click and say freeze. It'll freeze from that mesh up on down, and then this triangulated sphere, we can just delete it. And now we've got our really nice sub-D sphere there. I would also save this as a preset. I have one here. Just drag it into your basic meshes or whatever, and so you can just have that whenever you want. Okay, so let's go a little further here. Let's rename this to we'll just call it ball, and I'm actually going to press M and say ball here, and we'll just give it a material like a blue or something. So like that looks good in the viewport. And press N for a new mesh item, and we'll create a disk. And this is the disk we're going to constrain to the ball. And we'll just do it over here, just with direct modeling. Click on the cylinder, and what we'll do is just a radius of 0.5 and 0.5 and 0 and Y, and give it like quite a few sizes, like 64. And then for the top cap, do quad grid, and for the bottom cap, hit none, and then just hit apply, and you'll have it right there. And I can just isolate it right here, and I'm actually going to call this disk and give it like an orange. I think it's control. Let's drag hue. We'll just make it orangey. And so there's our disk. This pie menu I have here, where I have isolate select. What I did is I replaced the show locators, texture locators, which I don't think anybody really shows texture locators that often. I replaced it with this little button here where you can, not this one, I'm sorry, this one here where I'm sort of isolating these, isolate the selected mesh item, and that's just the 3D view inactive mesh visibility, right? So if it's inactive, it's invisible, and then when it's clicked off, all meshes are visible. So you can just do that in your pie menus. I should maybe do another tutorial on that. It's super useful just to swipe and isolate whatever you're working on rather than having to click that little icon. Okay, so we'll call this disk. And now let's set up our DEX discrete particles network to pack our disk onto the sphere. And I can also select the sphere and shift tab to Catmull-Clark it. Okay, so we need a couple of different items here. We need under DEX. If you haven't bought DEX or discrete particles, you should buy it. There's a whole video, a big live stream I did on it. It's sort of featured on Pixel Fondue. You should watch it there. It's a great particle packing kit from Frederick. and it's anyways awesome. I use it for all kinds of stuff. Anyway, we're going to use it for this. So what we want here is a surface distribution, and what it'll do is it'll let us pack that disk onto the surface of the sphere. And I also want a replicator, so we'll add a replicator. And yeah, that's it. So let's open up a schematic. I don't really need this direct modeling stuff anymore, so I'll hide it. And then I'm just going to drag everything I want into the schematic. Let me just get the camera and light up here at the top. So we want both our ray projection or surface distribution items from discrete particles. We want a replicator, we want our disk, and we want our sphere in there. Then we're just going to wire these up real quick. So the way you do it is the surface distribution is the particles, and so that is the particle source for the replicator. And the disk is the prototype for the replicator. That's what we're going to slap on there. And you can kind of see what's happening already. Is this just doing a preview there of this disk packing. And then the ball is the surface we're going to be packing onto. So I'm going to slap that there. You notice nothing happened because Dex defaults to just a preview pack. But if I turn it to raycast and pack, it'll raycast onto our sphere here. But what I'll need to do is turn our projection from planar to spherical. Like that, and then I usually bump it up in size just a little bit. So I'm just pressing R and hitting scale, and I'm moving up. You can see this, you may not be able to see it very well, but this, I'm going to wireframe, this yellow sphere. It's kind of like a texture locator. So I just bump it up just a little bit, just to make sure it's encompassing the entire sphere. And then on our surface distribution, we're going to do a couple things. One, this prototype domain, I'm just going to, that's this box here. I'm just going to hide it so we don't have to look at it. And then I'm going to drag down here where it says normal alignment, press 1. Now we're all aligned to the normals of the sphere that we're packing onto. And the maximum size, I'm just going to bump it up to like 0.25. Maybe 0.2 actually, that's kind of big. 0.2 and then maybe 0.05 for minimum size, like that. And then if you want to, like, you can do a couple things here. You can... if you up this multiplier, you can change the seed if you want to bounce them around. But I always bump up the multiplier, and it just kind of packs them in even tighter. So we got a bunch of them on there. And yeah, so we've got them packed, and now we just need to suck them down, sort of vacuum pack them onto the surface. We'll do this by pressing in and getting a new mesh. We'll call this merged disks. And we're going to use a merge mesh operator there, and we're going to merge in that replicator. So I'm merging in the replicator. So if I hide my replicator, you see those disks are all there. In fact, I can even just select the polygons of them. Of course, I made them orange, so you can't see the selection. You got a wireframe. There they are, right? So now they just took that replicator and just made them all polygons, right? So it's just one big blob of polygons. And we are going to use that same surface constraint mesh operation we used earlier to make our nice sub-D sphere to suck those down to the surface. So surface constraint. There's actually a really good free one that Mario Baldi made. I can't remember the name of it. I probably have it on here, actually. I'm not going to use it, but maybe I don't have it loaded up. Shrink wrap. Yeah, shrink wrap. So that's a free one. It's on Gumroad, I think, with Mario Baldi. It actually does, I think it's actually a little better than surface constraint. Surface constraints, the vanilla MODO one, works fine. So just double click that. What we're going to do is mode closest, constrained surface is going to be the ball. We're going to suck them down to the ball. And that's it. Just hit OK. And you'll see they're just all on the ball now. So I only hide my original prototype disks so you don't have to see it. If I hide my ball, you'll see them all just sucked on the surface there, right? So looking pretty good. So, okay, so that's the basics, right? So why don't we take this a little bit farther? And so what I did in this image, it's a little hard to tell, not this image, bring up Photoshop. This one is these are actually Booleaned out of the surface there. So they're, and then I have this little edge crease there which I'll show you. I'll just put them back on a little bit smaller to like fit them into the little holes we make. So what I did with that is I actually used Mesh Fusion. So let's work with these a little bit here. So we've got our little disks, right? They're merged together and they're surface constrained. Let's add another mesh op. Let's add a thicken mesh op. And for thicken, I'm going to just type in like 0.01 or so. Not a ton like that, but I'm going to click both sides. So it's, you know, thickening like 0.005 on the top and then 5 millimeters on the bottom. And what that'll do is when I turn my ball back on, it's going to sort of chop into it a little bit. In fact, maybe I'll make sure I have that pushed. Let me just make it a little bigger, maybe like 15 millimeters or something. So we can sort of chop into it a decent amount. And then what I did is I just selected my ball and I went over here and down to the Fusion tab and I just said New Fusion. And so that makes a new Fusion item out of our ball, and our ball is sort of hidden and given this blue sort of layer here, just showing us that it's being used by Mesh Fusion. And so Mesh Fusion is sort of a procedural geometry type. It's a sort of a subdivision surface geometry type, where subdivision surfaces are transformed into this fusion geometry type. I don't know what the equation being used here is. It's sort of similar to NURBS in a way, but it uses subdivision surfaces, and you can do these like really nice real-time booleans. And the easiest way to do it is I'm just going to click and select my merged disks here, and I'm going to drag it on top of the fusion item and just hold for a second. And then I'm just going to go down to Fusion, apply a subtraction. And that's going to apply a subtraction operation, just like a Boolean subtraction operation. And it may take a second because there's a lot of polygons there, but not super long. We'll see. And so there it is, yeah. So you can see the wireframe there, and you can see like these nice little divots just cut out. And it's got this nice little rounding. So that's the cool thing about Fusion. I'm not gonna turn this into a Fusion tutorial, but you can adjust like the edges of, you know, these crease, these, you know, they call them strips, and do all sorts of cool stuff with it. And it's just, you know, so yeah, so now we just have our Fusion object. Let me hide the Dex there, and you know, there it is. So the Fusion item is pretty heavy performance-wise, and I don't think we're going to, I mean, if you want to keep it live, you can, it'll just be slow. So I'm just going to freeze it, and then we can get on with filling our little cavities with spheres. So down to the bottom, duplicate and convert to mesh, or just convert to mesh. If you want to like have it hanging around at the scene, you could duplicate it and convert it to mesh. I'm just going to convert it to a mesh. So it's not, oh, right. So you have these different sort of quality here. Draft is the performance, so we probably want airtight final for final quality before we convert to mesh. So we'll do that, hit convert to mesh. And then it'll ask you if you want to delete the Fusion item, which I do. And so hit OK, and then it's going to, yeah, it's going to freeze it, and it's going to replace the Fusion item with just a nice dense mesh. So give it a second. Okay, there we go. It's called Fusion Mesh. You know, turn off wireframe. It looks pretty good. It's going to have these little normal map here to keep all the shading correct, and it should look pretty good. We'll turn on anti-aliasing just to clean up a little bit there. So yeah, looking good. Okay, let's finish this up by filling in all our little divots here with more of the disks. And yeah, so just pop open the schematic. If you see that you're in this Fusion workspace, that's because MODO creates a new Fusion workspace and you start creating Fusion objects. No big deal. Just, you know, go down to your workspace we originally started working in, and here's our original discrete particle setup. And then yeah, let's just Control D. Make sure you're in item mode. Control D, duplicate that disk. That seems like a bug to me. You should be able to Control D, duplicate in the schematic or the item list or the shader tree. Does if you're in component mode or item mode. I think that should be a bug. Anyway, we've got two disks now, so I'm gonna take a look at this second disk, and in polygon mode, I am going to just shrink it down a little bit, maybe on X and Z, maybe like 85% or so. Sounds good. We'll give it a try. And add another replicator to your scene. And this second replicator, of course, will just be the second disk as the prototype. And then we're going to reuse our surface distribution there. And there we go. So over, you know, they're just a little bit smaller, hovering over the little divots. And then we just do the same thing we did before. Press in for a new mesh item. We'll call this, you know, merge disk 2, or anything you can think of that's more creative than that. And then we're gonna do a merge mesh op there. And we're gonna merge in that second replicator 2. And so now if we actually hide a replicator, all those guys will still be there because they're just polygons now, right? We merged them into this thing just like before. So let's add our surface constraint. and keep it on the ball, and we'll do closest just like last time. It's going to constrain to that, our original ball we have there, right? And that should, keep all those surfaces the same. Like this original, blue surface here from the fusion mesh item should be the same, radius as the ball, and we have all these little orange guys now constrained to that. And this one, the edges, the margins are a lot bigger, so if you can always go back in. It should still be procedural if you want to increase the size of our disk 2 just a little bit, however you want it, sort of, your call. But then, yeah, let's just do one more thicken on this guy, and we will thicken it in the, downward direction. So add a thicken mesh op, and for offset, you just do like a negative 0.02, and it'll thicken it down, into our mesh fusion surface there. And yeah, that's about it. So then you can just go in, and what I did is I just manually, you just, merge this thing down if you want to. Just freeze it. And you can go in. You don't have to freeze it. You can actually select polygons like this and add a material tag mesh operation, and it'll use your polygon selection as a selection operation. So you can create materials that way, or you can just freeze it and go in and change up the materials if you want to. Like if we want all the big ones to be a different color, we just select them all like that, and press M and go purple or whatever. And yeah, it's up to you, whatever you want to do. That's purple with your shading and surfacing or whatever you want to do with it. But yeah, that's it. So yeah, pretty cool little thing. So I'll keep an eye on raw and rendered. You should maybe follow them if you're interested in this type of artwork. Yeah, I'll probably find a couple other images out of there and just make some Modo tutorials on there. I think one of the best ways to learn Modo is just find something cool that's done in another app like Cinema 4D or Houdini, or an image like in raw and rendered, and just try to make it in Modo.
Yum, yum!